Hello there, good evening and welcome to State of the Nation on the finest television, KBN TV. Thank you so much for joining us on Youth Day. And I must say, happy Youth Day to all the youths. We trust that you had great celebrations, but we've got business to do on State of the Nation tonight. We will be discussing interrogating the Zambia-US Health Agreement, as well as the state of our democracy. I'm your presenter, as usual, Kennedy Mambwe. And on the other side of the line, I am joined by Council Linda Kasonde, who is the Executive Director for the LCK Freedom Foundation. Linda, welcome to State of the Nation.
Thank you, Kennedy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. And hello to all the viewers out there. Happy Youth Day to all, including the young at heart.
Wonderful. It's a pity that you couldn't join us in studio. However, we're going to proceed. Now, on the 4th of February 2026, the Ministry of Health published a statement highlighting the proposed key areas of cooperation stipulated in the Memorandum of Understanding between the Zambian government and the United States of America. These include disease surveillance and outbreak response, laboratory systems, medicines and medical supplies, frontline health workers, and health data and data systems. Now, the agreement is expected to be signed before the 1st of April, which is next month, 2026, between Zambia and USA. If, and please underscore this, if it is not signed by that date, the bilateral compact will be discontinued in Zambia, pretty much as the case is with Zimbabwe, where this similar deal was rejected and USA cancelled the compact agreement in that country. The proposed agreement focuses on key issues such as performance-based, co-financed partnerships aimed at strengthening Zambia's health system to become self-reliant by 2030 through a supported total of $1 billion United States dollars. However, the debate among Zambians has intensified around the proposed health financing agreement, raising concerns about the transparency, sovereignty, and the implications of sharing health data and biological samples with the USA. With this, the civil society groups have expressed concern over Zambia's extended data sharing and the linking of health support to broader economic cooperation, including the mining sector. So joining me on the other side of the line, as I said, is LCK Freedom Foundation Executive Director Linda Kasonde. Now, Linda, what prompted the LCK Freedom Foundation and Chapter 1 Foundation to request access to the Zambia-USA memorandum and bilateral compact agreement? You sent a demand through the press query asking the government to publish, this MOU. What prompted you to do that?
Thank you, Kennedy. Well, firstly, Zambia is not the first country on the continent to have been presented with this potential deal. We were alerted to this issue by the first country on the continent to sign it, which was Kenya. And almost immediately, civil society in Kenya filed a court action to suspend the signing of that agreement for various constitutional issues around data privacy, around other rights and freedoms such as the right to life, etc. So when that was signed, and we were told by the US government that they'd be signing a series of other agreements across the continent, we knew it was a possibility that this could come to Zambia. And when the initial announcement was made by the Secretary of State, and another announcement made that signing of the MOU for granting the health aid to Zambia was contingent on Zambia signing the bilateral compact agreement. And let me just distinguish the two. So the MOU sets out what the US government will be funding in terms of health personnel, in terms of treatment of Zambian citizens, but it also includes a requirement that Zambia share the personal data of patients in Zambia that the government has, as well as the specimen samples collected from these patients. And the reason why that is an issue is because in the wrong hands, this information can be used for bad purposes. It can be used by pharmaceutical companies to manufacture drugs that potentially could impact only Africans. It can be used in the wrong hands, for example, for biological warfare. We don't know what, I mean, the problem is that once this data is released and it ends up in the wrong hands, it could be a problem in many different ways. I mean, there's a chance it could be used properly, but once it is in another government's hands, they have the option to sell that data to pharmaceutical companies and other organizations doing research that could be used for bad purposes against the people of Zambia or any other African country that signs this MOU. Now, the reason, if you just allow me, the reason why the government apparently hasn't signed it yet is because the signing of this MOU made conditional on Zambia also signing a bilateral compact agreement, which essentially allows the US to exploit Zambian minerals within the cost of this health aid of $1.5 billion over 5 years. So $1.5 billion over 5 years is essentially $300,000 every year for 5 years. Now, when we look at our mineral resources in Zambia, surely we are earning more than $300,000 per year. So it begs the question, surely we can afford this to pay for our own health and research in Zambia, exploiting our own minerals at a cost that is reasonable and commensurate with its value. Because we also don't want to give away our minerals. They're not infinite. We have a limited number of minerals that we can use for a limited number of years, and we need to maximize the value that we receive for those minerals for the benefit of every citizen of this country. We need development in this country, and that is the best way through which we can achieve it.
Now, Linda, isn't it very interesting that the USA itself has data protection, very strict measures around data protection for its citizens? Isn't it, surprising and shocking that they would want to subject a poor country to make available to the US government, data about Zambian citizens that is supposed to be kept private?
The current government, the current US government, has told the world that it's America first. Everybody else is secondary. And so they are putting their own national and economic interests above the interests of everybody else. And that's where our government allow ourselves to be exploited in a way that compromises not only our privacy and dignity as citizens, but also our national sovereignty. Why should we give away our minerals at a small price when we can sell them on the open market for a much higher value? These are all questions that people should be asking themselves. And also, it's important to say, I've heard a number of people say, why are you questioning government on signing these agreements? It should be them only who decide what is in the best interest of the people. That is not the correct position. The contents of these agreements are such that they affect every citizen of this country, and therefore they need to be subjected to greater scrutiny. Is this the best deal that Zambia can get for itself? Are there other ways through which we can achieve funding our health care and selling our minerals at a rate that is more in keeping with our value as a people? Because, for example, the health data and the biosamples they've been collecting, those are invaluable. And again, in the wrong hands, very bad things can happen.
Right. Now, I know that the government has not published in full the MOU. What does, you are a lawyer, what does the law say about public institutions, having to avail, certain pieces of information when citizens demand for such? We have the access to information, for instance. What are your views around this?
So in medical research, aside from the law, in medical research, there are ethics around how you can use people's health data and how you can use their health samples. Individuals whose health data and samples are being used must give their consent before that material can be used for whatever purposes. And the problem with this MOU is that it's a blanket consent without the individuals who are affected giving their personal consent. And that's where the data protection laws come in place. They're fairly new laws in Zambia. I think they came into play around 2021. And these are laws that are applicable all over the world, because it has been noticed that people's data is being sold on the open market. For example, companies like Facebook or Twitter or any kind of social media company extracts data that its users provide on their platforms by interacting with other people on their platforms. And that information is there other companies who use that information for making decisions about things that they're marketing, or the opinions of the public. So that's a way in which data can be used. Now, the problem again is consent. And the government does not have the right to give blanket consent to another sovereign nation without us being consulted. And that's where civil society is calling on the government to be transparent and accountable in the manner in which they are handling this issue.
Right.
Because again, we need the best deal for the country.
Right. Now, I know you've raised issues regarding consent and privacy and all of that. In Kenya, as you cited, it took the civil society to demand that this deal must, be suspended. And now you've raised a number of issues, and I think you've written to the Human Rights Commission in an event that the Zambian government, because we are known to be very docile and very less protective of our sovereignty and the rights of citizens. Zimbabwe has rejected a similar deal. Kenya, it has been challenged in court. Will you be surprised if the Zambian government went ahead and put the citizens and our sovereignty in harm's way? And if that were to happen, what is the next step do you envisage taking in terms of recourse as civil society?
question. Firstly, I need to explain to the viewers how we have demanded the MOU to see copies of the MOU and the bilateral compact agreement from the government using the Access to Information Law. So the Access to Information Act provides, allows citizens to demand information that should be public from the government, so that citizens can be made aware of what their rights are and also what the duties of the government are towards its citizens. And under the Access to Information Law, the first step was to write to the government departments that were responsible for signing these agreements. So the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And when we did not receive a response within the 7 days required under the Access to Information Law, we then took the next step of appealing to the Human Rights Commission. Now, that is a procedure also in the Access to Information Law. Now, I have been a fierce critic of the Access to Information Act because I don't think it's strong enough and allows citizens to really be able to challenge government on some of these things. So, for example, this appeal that we're making to the Human Rights Commission, the Act does not provide a time frame within which the Human Rights Commission should respond. So do we keep waiting and waiting forever? And also, under the Access to Information Law, there's no guarantee that the Human Rights Commission will even respond or give us a response that is satisfactory. So all of these are critical problems with the law itself. So it is possible that we may find ourselves in court. In Kenya, it was the journalists who were doing that investigative reporting who alerted the Kenyan citizens of this issue. And when the lawyers went to court to challenge the MOU and other agreements that were conditional on the signing of the MOU, the lawyers used the information that they had gathered extremely critical role in ensuring accountability of this government or any government in Zambia. And, you know, I can't just die like that.
Right. So potentially we might end up in court. That is the takeaway for tonight, that if the government intends to go ahead, you may, together with other civil society organizations, take this matter to court.
It is definitely a possibility.
Right. Now, I need for you to stress, for the benefit of our viewers there, I know you mentioned it in passing, but I need to pose this one more time. Why should citizens be concerned about the issues that might be contained in this unpublished memorandum of understanding? And why keep it private anyway?
Okay, so maybe just to break it down. In a democracy, in any democracy, a real democracy in which the rights of the citizens are respected, in which democracy is rule of the people, by the people, for the people, there's no such thing as Boma ni Boma. Every citizen has the right to know what affects their lives. If the government is taking an action on their behalf, they have a right to know why they're doing it and what and how. You can't just accept and say the government is signing on our behalf, we have nothing to do with it, we've elected them and that's it. These people that we put into office, we elect them as our representatives. In our best interests, then we need to call them to account. We need to ensure that they're being transparent about what they do, and we need to ensure that they account to us for their actions. So if we don't like what they're doing, we should be able to tell them, don't do this, and they should be able to act accordingly. So it's the citizens that have the power in a democracy. And I think for far too long and in far too many instances, Zambians give their power away because they don't think they have it.
Right. Thank you for that insight on why citizens need to be aware of this. Now, I recall earlier you put into context the 1.5 billion US dollars spread over 5 years. You're talking about average 300,000. 300,000, you say? 300 million, sorry. Yeah, 300 million dollars per year. This is money that we could generate from our mining resources. Now, the very fact that you have hinted at the fact that the US seems to be linking this health support to our rare mineral resources, does this come across to you as if the USA is trying to arm twist a fragile young democracy, a fragile young developing nation?
Look, there's no doubt that Zambia has benefited greatly from health aid from the US over the years, particularly in the area of HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. That health aid has been very critical in containing those diseases in our country. And in fact, lowering infection rates of HIV and sort of slowing transmission and ensuring that those who are infected, have long and healthy lives. We are very grateful for all that assistance. But when health aid becomes now a tool for enriching oneself at the expense of the safety and dignity of a people like the Zambian people, then it becomes a problem. And I think we only have to look to the COVID pandemic to know that, in fact, it is of benefit to the US to help Zambia contain the HIV virus. Because those of us who are old enough to remember when the HIV pandemic was rampant in the 1980s, it spread everywhere, including the US. And so, just like COVID, if you contain it everywhere that it is, then it doesn't spread everywhere. So it's not just for our personal benefit here in Zambia. We're very grateful. People have survived and are doing well. We're now thriving. But it also helps them on the other side. Just like COVID, we saw how it spread like wildfire. But once it was contained in every jurisdiction, the pandemic was contained and we're now living normal lives. That is precisely what happens when you help people achieve their health goals with regards to diseases that can spread. So, like I said, it's not just for our benefit, it's also for their benefit.
Right. Now, you have written to the institutions of government, and the law in terms of access to information stipulates the time frame within which you needed to get your response, 7 days. And you have taken a further step to write to the Human Rights Commission, who are still silent about these matters. What do you do as civil society, or indeed the citizens in general, when government lacks transparency that should be guaranteeing the functioning of democracy? How do you get around this, to ensure that there's transparency? If the government seems to be silent about the same laws that are supposed to be aiding, cooperation between them and the citizens, the silence, does it help matters?
Kennedy, well, thank you for that question. I think the answer to your question is we're doing it right now. In this program, we're making people aware of their rights. We are educating them on what the issues are, and we're educating them on the response that civil society wants to take to ensure transparency and accountability. And you, the media, are extremely critical in amplifying our voice so that all citizens understand what is at stake. Because it's not just up to us as civil society. Every citizen of this country is affected by this decision. And so we need the citizens of this country to take charge and also demand answers of the government. And let's not forget, this is an election year. You know, if the government makes decisions that are not in the best interests of the people of Zambia, then the people of Zambia should know what to do. It's their decision.
What should the people of Zambia do?
As I said, this is an election year. If it turns out that you don't believe that the current government, who now have the mandate to represent the people of Zambia in relation to foreign affairs and signing of international agreements, and you come and find that despite protests with regards to our personal health data, our privacy, our sovereignty, our dignity, our mineral resources, and they're giving them away for a few pennies, what do you do as a voter? What would you do?
I would protect my interest as a citizen.
Every citizen should protect their interests.
Right. Now, looking at the magnitude of this matter, Linda, I mean, it's really a very sensitive issue, which might require, in my view, participation of lawmakers. Shouldn't this be presented before Parliament? Shouldn't Parliament, with its oversight role, have input into this before we hear government has secretly signed off our private health data to the interest of Mr. Donald Trump?
Indeed, Kennedy, that's how it should work in an ideal scenario, in an ideal democracy such as ours. But unfortunately, sometimes even our lawmakers go to sleep because they're the ones who should be asking these questions in Parliament. Why are we signing this agreement? Why haven't you brought it to Parliament for us to take a look at? What does it benefit the people of Zambia in the long run? Is this the best decision we can make? What are the alternatives? These are all questions that should be asked by our parliamentarians. And unfortunately, maybe I've missed it, but I'm not seeing these questions being asked of our government.
As you said, perhaps our parliamentarians are sleeping. They slept on Bill 7. They could sleep on our sensitive, healthy data being sold to America.
Perhaps.
Now, let's speak about this broadly. You are civil society, and you sometimes collaborate to strengthen your voice in a way that will compel accountability and good governance. What can you say, broadly speaking, are some of the challenges you are facing as civil society to bring about accountability and governance, good governance within the confines of this particular administration of the UPND? Any challenges you are facing broadly as civil society?
I was on a podcast, if not, I think it was last week, discussing this very issue, the need to strengthen civil society, because civil society plays a very critical role in the governance of this country, in holding governments to account, especially where our opposition political parties are in disarray or somehow are not holding the government to account. And now, this is not to say that civil society are politicians. They are not. They are simply civic actors who are concerned about the welfare of citizens, whether it's their human rights, whether it is their humanitarian situations such as having clean water, good health, good schools, all those things. So that's the role civil society plays. And in an ideal democracy, all institutions of governance are working properly. So that would be Parliament is asking questions in Parliament why we're signing this agreement. The opposition is also raising questions in Parliament to find out where we're at with this agreement. Are we going to sign it? Why are we signing it? Is there any other way to avoid this, the compromises that we're being asked to make? Then, of course, the judiciary has its own role to play. If this matter goes to court, is the court independent and is it prepared to act without fear or favor to defend the rights of citizens in this country? And then, of course, we have the ordinary citizen who every 5 years decides whether whoever's in government is acting in their best interests and has shown themselves to be caring of the rights and privileges of our citizens. So all these things have to act together. The institutions have to be strong, and each member of our society, that is what a citizen is. It is somebody who defends the society within which they live.
I keep hearing you emphasizing on the need for citizens to act in an election year if a government does not defend their interest. Do you think that signing this MOU could be a major campaign issue in an election year?
Well, for it to become a campaign issue, it would require a lot of public sensitization. It would require the media to play its role as well, to ask the necessary questions of the government. So, and it requires people to explain to ordinary citizens what is at stake. And let me just explain what is at stake. So why does it matter that our health data and the specimens that health facilities in Zambia collect will be handed over to the US government? Why is that important? Let me just give you a historical context. In the United States, many years ago, two things happened. There was a lady called Henrietta Lacks who had, I think it was cervical cancer. And the doctors discovered that her cells were very unique. And instead of trying to help this woman, they decided to keep collecting her cells, regenerating them. These cells have gone all over the world to be studied. Meanwhile, this poor lady was not relieved of her condition. So she just became a guinea pig there for people to study and to use her cells all over the world. There's also historically in the United States, the well-documented case of men in Tuskegee, United States, who were experimented on for studies on syphilis. Now, this is what I mean by saying that if our health data and specimens end up in the wrong hands, there's so much that can be done. That would not be good for our country or our people. You talk about drugs that may not be to the benefit of our people. We don't know. I mean, this world is becoming very crazy, as you can see. We're now at war all over the world. We've got no access to our fuel.
When
wars instead of solving problems.
When I was researching on this particular issue and why Kenya refused, why Zimbabwe refused, they seem to be projecting a school of thought that says there is now this global contention for population control, and as you as you have rightly pointed out, the USA has been donating drugs to Zambia and to Africa. They could use your specimen to manufacture a drug that could clearly undermine your population, could actually, according to the research that is in the public domain, could actually wipe out a generation. I don't know if these are some of the sentiments you share or some of the concerns that you may have come across as well.
Well, speculation, because again, we don't know ultimately in whose hands this data and our biological material can end up in. And like I said, if it ends up in the wrong hands, that's an example of something that could happen. It's not far-fetched. There is the capability, the technological capability to do these things. And so we should not be naive to think that somebody will take our data and will handle it well and will only use it for good purposes. We will have no control.
Right. Now, before we move on to interrogate the state of democracy, America has been a good friend of Zambia for many, many years, and we have never known them to attach medical aid to economic gains. Is Zambia becoming a pawn, just, a victim of geopolitics, because perhaps America might be thinking China is mining and China is not giving aid to Zambia? Why must we continue giving aid to Zambia and we're not benefiting economically? Do you think perhaps that could be the new school of thought that is championing the new thinking of America, to attach their medical aid to now economic, benefit, which is a totally new development?
It is a very unique situation. As I mentioned earlier, the current U.S. government has a America First policy. So everything that they're doing is to enrich their people, their country, and not so much for its traditional role, which has been more of if you like, a global benefactor, helping other countries that perhaps are not as developed in this world. But let's be fair. Probably there've always been conditionalities to whatever aid Zambia receives, whether it's from the US or any other country. But where it comes to our sovereignty, we must be firm. We can't allow ourselves to be used, abused by people who we haven't voted for.
Right.
Simple as that.
As simple as that. Now, let's look at the statement that you issued yesterday in conjunction with Caritas Zambia, Chapter 1 Foundation, and Your Freedom Foundation. You raised concerns about Zambia's democracy facing, shrinking space, or Zambia's democratic space shrinking. Are you able, for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, to just perhaps cite 1, 2, 3 examples what compelled you and convinced you that indeed, as we head towards the 2026 elections in August on 13th, democratic space in Zambia is shrinking?
Kennedy, there's several examples of this. I think the most frightening one for me is the fact that the right to protest, the right to demonstrate, the right to march against something that, in terms of defending your rights or interests as citizens, has more or less closed. Not just for opposition political parties, but also for ordinary citizens. We saw, was it last year, was it early this year, when the Oasis Forum wanted to hold a march to protest against Bill 7. There was Mingalato there, and there it didn't happen. Nobody's allowed to protest anymore. It's like that avenue is closed. And that is not healthy in a democracy. Because even as the leaders of our country, the people who we elect to lead us, if they don't allow people to express themselves and to hear the views of ordinary citizens, they then start living in a bubble where they think they're so good and that nobody can touch them and that nothing is wrong in the country because everybody is saying yes to whatever they're asking. That is a very dangerous situation for any government to find itself in. It leaves government naked because no one is allowed to tell you anything. So that's just one example. Then we've had a few laws that have come into place. So for example, the previous government had enacted the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act. I think it was of 2021. And when this current government came into office, they told us that they would amend that act to make it more in line with our democratic rights and freedoms. Unfortunately, the complete opposite has happened. There's so many people now who are frightened of speaking out on social media or anywhere else because we see these people being arrested every day for some form of cyber crime. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't any real cyber crimes, but in a democratic society, people have the right to express themselves and give opposing views to the government if that's what they believe. I'm not saying that they should be rude or anything like that, but I'm also saying that when somebody is critical of the government, criminalization of that person is not a democratic act. There are other ways. You sue them in court for defamation. That's what that's for. And in fact, we used to have these criminal defamation laws, which the government very proudly told us they were repealing. Are we not seeing citizens being arrested for so-called defaming the president, even though that law is no longer in existence? These are problems in a democratic society. And then we see people like Fred Membe, who has recently expressed concerns about the delay in the burial of our former president, Edgar Lungu. Those were legitimate concerns. It has now been 8-9 months, whatever it is, and our former president has yet to be buried. You don't even have to be a fan of his to acknowledge that that is a problem for us as a nation, because we can't move on properly without mourning properly. These are issues and they should not be criminalized. Why should somebody be arrested for saying that in a democracy? And then, of course, the worst thing I find in our current dispensation is self-censorship, including by the media. I was supposed to go on a radio program sometime last month, only to find that the radio program had been scrapped because the radio station was afraid that they wouldn't be granted the renewal of their license. Does that sound like something that should happen in a democracy?
Not at all.
I don't think so. Exactly, yes. So there are so many issues that we have. And the other problem with shrinking the democratic space, aside from the fact that the government doesn't get to hear what it needs to hear, is it doesn't allow citizens to exercise their freedom of choice because they're constrained by fear. And that, again, is not something that should happen in a democracy where the people should have all the power.
Right. Now, Linda, you've talked about the recent arrest of Dr. Fred Membe for criticizing the President Hakainde Hichilema administration in holding, this matter in court for longer than necessary, which has led to, the situation where we are in, that 9 months after the 6th Republican president died, is still frozen in a South African mortuary. Now, an interesting matter that has arisen out of all of that is you have the Attorney General telling the media not to be reporting about the death and non-burial of Eddie Galungu. He's saying it is stressful to the family. That is on one hand. You have now Bishop Mambo, who is a close ally to President Hichilema, saying we should not hold elections if Lungu has not been buried. What do you make of that?
Again, these are not things that should happen in a democracy. Because why should a government official dictate what somebody wants to say about their former president? These are issues that concern everyone in the nation. And therefore, we must discuss them until there's a solution found. Because it's been too long now, and we really need to put this behind us. Then with regards to the issue, you're saying Bishop Mambo said that the election should not be held until the president is buried. We hope and pray that that is not a signal that anybody is going to delay the election, because that is not in the interest of our democracy. We have in our constitution a date on which every general election should be held, which is the second Thursday of August, and that is in our constitution. Now, as we know, as Bill 7 taught us, we now know that the government has an inbuilt majority in parliament to do whatever it wants. So we hope that they will not abuse that power to do things that are not in our interests. And speaking of the constitution, we also have heard our very own Attorney General mention that after the elections, assuming that they'll be re-elected, after the elections, they're going to reopen the constitutional review process. So is that really making sense? Because what was Bill 7 all about, if not to amend the constitution? And civil society argued very strenuously that the constitutional amendment process should be deferred to after the elections when it's not politicized. And sure enough, the enactment of Act number 13, formerly Bill 7, has just shown us how politicizing an issue can result in constitutional amendments that are not in the interests of the Zambian people, that are expedient to the incumbent government, and that appear not to have even been a permanent fixture. We know that a constitution is not something to be toyed with. We're not supposed to change it every year. So when you make amendments, you need to be consulting the people as to what they want to see and doing meaningful consultation, not a 2-week process where you're telling everybody we used AI to consult the people. This is just an abuse of process, an abuse of our democracy, an abuse of the funds that we taxpayers pay to government to do an exercise that could have completely waited. This whole technical committee, all those things could have waited until after the election.
When you look at all of these things that are happening, and this is a government that was elected with a lot of assurances to promote the rule of law, to promote constitutionalism, to promote democracy, public participation, citizens' participation, and all of this. But when you reflect on the current happenings, do you have some level of, regret in terms of what was expected of the UPND against what they are doing?
That's not for me to say. I think each individual citizen needs to decide for themselves whether or not they feel that the promises that were made ahead of the last election have been delivered on. Each citizen, each voter in this country needs to make that personal assessment. So it's not up to me to give my personal opinion.
What's your personal?
All I know is that.
What's your personal opinion?
I beg your pardon?
What's your personal opinion as a voter?
Well, coming from a human rights organization, I think my biggest disappointment is the fact that the law continues to be weaponized against citizens to silence them. We talk about the Public Order Act, which is preventing public gatherings. We talk about the cybersecurity and cyber crimes laws that are silencing people online. We talk about the defamation laws that are being used to weaponize against opponents. We talk about this same MOU that we're talking about today, which is not in the interest of the people of Zambia. We talk about these constitutional amendments that have been made without proper consultation. These are things that concern me as an individual. And I think they should also concern every citizen.
Right. Now, as we head towards elections in the next 4 months or thereabout, Zambians will be going to the poll to decide whether or not the mandate of the UPND should be renewed or curtailed. Why is it important to promote an environment of openness, tolerance, and respect for divergent views? I say this because I notice you've raised a number of concerns about citizens not being able to express themselves. Yet, in a campaign season, people must be free to speak.
Yes, and as I mentioned earlier, the reason why citizens should be free to speak is because they have free will and should be able to freely choose who to govern them. Okay, and when you silence people, when you stop them from meeting, when you put them in jail, that instills fear on people. They feel that they can't be free about what they think and what they feel and what they are experiencing as citizens. And that is never a good thing for the citizen, and it's certainly not a good thing for any government, because it means that you are not properly consulting the people who you claim to represent, and they're not telling you when you're not doing your job. So maybe people are smiling at you when really they think something else. These are the problems with constraining rights and freedoms in any country.
Earlier, you talked about a radio station that cancelled your program where you were supposed to feature, and the excuse they gave was that they were probably scared their license would not be renewed by IBA. And I would like to believe that that was a misrepresentation of the mandate of IBA, by that particular radio station. But given that it is something that you lived through, it happened to you, and you have publicly communicated it here on air, it would appear that there is some level of intimidation and restrictions that are creeping through, thereby constricting the freedom of expression and freedom of the press. What must we do as a society to bring back normalcy where citizens should be able to enjoy their constitutional rights?
Look, I'll answer that question by just examining what is happening in the US at the moment. What we're seeing there is also a situation in which citizens feel that they're being bullied into silence or from making certain decisions. And when you do that, you empower those in power to think they can do whatever they want, whether it's in your interest or whether it's not in your interest. And so the reason we talk about institutions in our country holding other institutions to account is to prevent exactly that. Because when you allow someone to be absolutely powerful, they can do wrong things and there'll be no consequences. So it's up to us as citizens not to withhold our views. And in fact, self-censorship sometimes can be even more damaging than someone arresting you for using your voice. Because self-censorship, you begin to assume what the other person is thinking. Maybe so you start saying, maybe if I say this, then I won't get my license. But you don't know because you haven't tried, and so the people who are your audience are being deprived of hearing certain views because you're too scared to do your job.
Hello there, Linda.
I'm here.
Okay, great. I thought I'd lost you. Now, let's talk about tolerance within the political environment. Only this week, a matter that has been in court for over 4 years nearly 4 years, I must say, of the Patriotic Front. Only this week has it received some level of light. The ruling by Judge Concepta Zulu, which seems to indicate that the PF may now, have gone back into the right hands. Before that confusion, which many believed and still do believe was a sponsored hostile takeover of the former ruling party. There has been this feeling that the political environment lacks democratic practice and tolerance, where opposition could exercise its mandate to hold the current government to account. When you look at what's been happening, where the PF, as an example, has been in courts not because of infighting, but because of what men perceive is sponsored. The UPND were in opposition for over 23 years, and I think they exercised what an opposition party should exercise. They held all the other governments, to account. They provided strong opposition. Is there anything that should happen to bring back that, strong voice of the opposition when there is this perception that the environment is very, very limiting?
This issue of recognizing the law against not just ordinary citizens, but also opposition political parties. And as a result, instead of doing their job, they're attending meetings at the police. They are with the government position because they're supposed to be doing their job and they're not doing it because they're attending to all manner of other things.
Wow. We seem to be having a bad signal. I'm not sure if you can get us from studio. All right. We're trying to re-establish connectivity with my guest, Executive Director for the LCK Freedom Foundation, Linda Kasonde. She's joining me via voice interview, and we are looking at the state of democracy as well as interrogating the Zambia-US Health Agreement. Linda, are you back?
I hear you.
Right. Now, I would like us perhaps to pick up one or two phone calls, but before we do that, you raised the concern at the fact that the Public Order Act, which the government promised to repeal, actually has tended out to be a subject of repression and oppression by the UPND administration. And so citizens cannot express themselves. They cannot, public rallies cannot be held. But then citizens must exercise their democratic right. What must they do without going beyond the limit? They must exercise their right, but those in power are not allowing them to. They still have to exercise their power. I mean, their right. What should they do without going beyond the limit? Is there any recourse? Is there a way of suing government, or what should be done? Okay,
So Kennedy.
Yes.
Single party, are you there?
I can hear you now.
Okay, every single party, when in opposition, have told us that they're going to repeal this law and replace it with a more constitution-friendly legislation, but it has never happened in the history of our country since independence. So we can't single out this government for that flaw. But the citizens are also not powerless. So the law is in place. All you need to do is to follow what the law says. So, for example, you need to give the notice to the police if you want to gather, and give it in good time, so that there's as little excuse as possible for not giving you, or for not allowing your issue to go ahead. And if there's no reasonable excuse for denying your protest to go ahead. And I think it's fair that, a number of people have gone to court over the years, including the Law Association of Zambia. And what we did benefit from the last case taken up by Laz is that the court said that if you deny a protest from going ahead, you must give an alternative date in the earliest possible time. And that, you need to give a reasonable excuse. So I don't think people are following up on that part enough, because the court has told us. And it is up to our citizens to exercise their rights and to enforce the judgment of the court, so that they can go ahead and express themselves freely by way of demonstration.
Right. I would like to pick up one or two phone calls before we wrap up our show. Director, let's take a break so that we get ready for phone calls, and then my guest will be able to answer some of the public sentiments that may be coming from our dear viewers and listeners across the nation. Thank you so much for still staying with us. This is State of the Nation on KBN TV, and I'm here with Executive Director for the LCK Freedom Foundation. That's Linda Kasonde. And we'll be picking up some calls. Good evening and welcome to State of the Nation. Your name and where you're calling us from.
My name is Tsanga.
Yes, Mr. Tsanga.
I'm calling you from Kitwe.
You're calling us from Kitwe.
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
I followed the program. What I can say is Zambia is in problems. Fortunately, I have been a teacher of history. I have studied how dictators behave. First of all, they gag the institutions like the judiciary and so on and so forth. so that people can have nowhere to go. So in our country, there's nowhere you can run to. These guys had a plan before they came into power. Their plan was to gag Zambians, to become dictators, hardcore dictators. If you look at the Bill 7, the way they carried it, you can be shocked. People said no, but they made sure it went through. And when you talk of the memorandum of understanding, whether we like it or not, they know what they are doing. So it's unfortunate that we can have learned people like our president HH is a university graduate behaving in the way he's behaving. This is not the way to govern. He should give time to the people. He should listen to the people. But the country is just upside down. It's unfortunate. And we don't know how elections are going to be. Because definitely there won't be free elections. They are planning a lot of things. So I thank Madam Linda Kasonde. She has elaborated a lot of issues, and those are the women we need. They are very brave, and we thank God that they may continue to be brave like that and speak for us. Because this country, we are docile. We even allow a president to champion something which is illegal. How can the president champion illegality, imingalato, and the people are looking at him? So it's unfortunate. We are being ruled by these people. I don't think we are patriotic. Our prayer is let our country be free. Let our peace continue. Otherwise, they don't mean well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tsanga from the Copper Belt. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you, sir.
All right, you may cut the line. Right, that's Mr. Tsanga from the Copper Belt. Thanking my guest, Linda, for being brave and speaking out on issues that are affecting the nation. Here is yet another caller. Good evening and welcome to State of the Nation. Your name and where you're calling us from.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Miss Pastor Mambo, and good evening, Madam Linda Kasonde.
Good evening.
Yes, this is Joseph Kazembe calling from Undola.
Mr. Kazembe, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, I've been following the discourse and I've enjoyed quite a lot, and your explanation is... Yeah, I've been following the discourse. So, in this case, what I would like to say is this government of UPND, they lack democracy. There is no democracy whatsoever. Whatever you tell them, they have to do it their own way. Take over the Bill 7 saga. People oppose it terribly, and they have to give example of various kinds, but they couldn't, adhere to the majority of the Zambians, or what they wanted as to be done. And they had even gone to the extent of bribing some of the members of parliament.
Obviously that's an accusation. That's an accusation you cannot prove, obviously.
All right, let me withdraw that one. All right, I will withdraw that one. But the fact is, some members of parliament were not supposed to, to disappoint their electorates, which had really happened, and I was very disappointed, and I'm still very disappointed with whatever took place during that time. Now look at some of the examples, like arresting Dr. Membe for just commenting on something which is an obvious thing. That the government was supposed to pay attention, and maybe they could have even called him and discussed the matter thoroughly well. But in this case, he was made to sleep in the cells for 2 days. Was that definitely right? Is that the way to go? No, whatsoever. And when it comes to the, the people to assemble, we in opposition are not allowed to assemble whatsoever. You can give you can get the permission and try to get the police. Get the permission from the police, but at the end of the day, you'll find that you are not going to be allowed to go ahead.
You may conclude.
It is very unfortunate this time around that this government is not a listening government as they always boast about. It is a government that boasts about without even giving the thorough example to the people of the country that they rule. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One more call, and I will let my guest respond to your cause. I just want to pick up one more call, and then I will let my guest respond. Good evening and welcome to State of the Nation. Your name and where you're calling us from?
Yes, Kenneth
Innocent from Serenge. Yes, please, your question or your contribution.
na topic yo muletere ili huino sana okunfako ifyo fili chitika ero balondewe fintu sana the only point in Ngalanda upali no shita fionzo la kwa tishana ngawanga twale mina ndo kote kwa nisha fionzo mpaka kama chita mwalimu na yosema by elections ya sachitika yonza by elections ya kuforcina kupokolola abantu ama seat by force tabale konga constitution ito rula nda awe umwe ne D7 yabali kene bukukoti gaji rule out but bali forcing what D7 mpaka chitikio zo bale fare that's why democracy has special into Zambia mono tamuri democracy people have no rights mono Zambia in the current government natopera.
Thank you very much. Let me allow now my guest to react to those sentiments. Linda, please.
Thank you, Kennedy, and thank you to all the callers who have called in. So based on the 3 callers who've called in, clearly people out there have concerns about whether the democratic space is free enough for everybody to operate in. And the concern is that is not the case. So, again, we thank platforms like this that allow people to air their views. Whoever needs to listen should listen and act accordingly. Because otherwise you'll be exposed. If you don't listen to the people who are supposed to put you in office, they might not continue to support you. It's important that you allow people to express themselves, give their views and concerns. And certainly, I was concerned by, I think it was the first caller who talked about, he said, basically the government will do what it wants to do with regards to the MOU with the US government. And why this is concerning is that caller has no confidence that his voice matters. That is a very big problem in a democracy. A very big problem. So those who have ears, please listen to what these people are saying. Specifically speaking to the current government, when you were elected, you told us you'd be a government of the rule of law and democracy. And unfortunately, what we are seeing and experiencing is democratic backsliding, which is never a good thing because we've come from far. People fought and died to get multi-party democracy in this country. And we shouldn't lose it because people are afraid, because people don't want to listen to what the people who vote them into office are saying. I'll stop there.
Right. I'll pick maybe 2 more last calls, but before then, 2 SMSs. Good evening, PK and Linda. Very informative program. Continue with the good work. Anthony from Chongwe. And another one here says, this one is sending from Kitwe. He says, in relation to Bishop Mambo's thinking, please don't play with elections. Don't. Someone from Kitwe. Let me pick up one more call. Good evening and welcome to State of the Nation. Your name and where you're calling us from?
My name is Philemon from Chitulika, Zambia.
Philemon from Chitulika.
Yes, Muchinga province.
Muchinga province. Please go ahead with your question or your contribution.
Thank you. Allow me to disagree with your guest, Mr. Moderator. Let me qualify this point. He is saying shrinking. According to what I was told, shrinking means from the big to the smaller one. Now, looking at where we are coming from, and in terms of democracy, he's saying democracy is shrinking. Shrinking means from bigger to smaller to small. Now, where we are coming from, Mr. Moderator, I think Madam Kasonde, she has forgotten how this incumbent was not given space to campaign. Then, opposition was not given any space to campaign. You know, the previous regime went to the extent of campaigning amid this of COVID, saying, you know, we are commissioning projects. They were campaigning, while it's my opposition, they were not campaigning. Now, this time, you know, the police can give you an advice to say, due to security reason, you will be taught. And when this opposition are given space to campaign a rally, they will start shouting. Surely, is that good? Hello?
We are hearing you.
Yeah, is that good? That's why you are seeing that these policemen are finding it difficult to give my opposition a chance to campaign. Not until they themselves change. Then they will be given the time to campaign. Otherwise, what I'm seeing that in this country, there is political, you know, we are highly political charge. And when somebody is issuing unpalatable remarks like SP president, surely, a mature person can issue such remarks. Now imagine if the remarks were issued by Barari. There was going to be commotion. And I'm thanking the police to keep that man two days in the custody. Number one, it was due to protect himself and where he lives. Otherwise, I'm asking you, my politicians, that you should make sure that for you to be given Malawi.
You may conclude.
In conclusion, you should have substance. Don't plunge this country into problems. There are other issues like a bag of millennium, my road, you know, my schools. You know, these are the issues people want to listen. Not my remarks here, then you are there protecting them. No. I think if I were general inspector of the police, I cannot give any right if opposition continues.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for calling. The gentleman from Chitulika disagrees with you, Linda. He says there is no shrinking of democratic space, and he compares today to what could have been prevailing during the Patriotic Front. One more caller, and I'll let you respond to these two, and then we wrap up our program. Good evening, and welcome to State of the Nation. Your name and where you're calling us from. Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
This is senior citizen Fano Mangala.
Senior citizen, long time not heard from you.
Most unfortunately, I have not been feeling well up to now. I'm just beginning to recover a little bit.
May the Lord touch you.
Thank you so much.
Please go ahead.
For me, I'm really a very worthy person. Remember, I even addressed myself as senior citizen. I've seen all these governments. But under this government, what frightens me, even if we found ourselves in this country, democracy, this party that has just come into power, I think we've been able to look after our democracy for the past political party that has been to power in this country. They tried to look after our democracy. But in this party here, the UPND, they have totally killed our democracy. To confirm what I'm saying, even the opposition political parties have also been killed. Today you cannot belong to any political party and think that maybe yes I will, but no. Like we've seen all the issues that we've tried to put up, constitution making process, the people that did not support certain clauses, all were just dismissed and they just went ahead. This party, they believe, our president believes in, does not believe in majority opinion. He believes in what he himself believes, not what the majority people can believe. So I don't think that we have, these are the issues we have talked time and again, but there is no change. There is no change. So I'm asking Linda one simple question. If we have tried all that we could, what do you think is left for us to do? Because in certain places, people resort to violence, what and so on. But I think you are the right person to advise, because we have done all that we could, but nothing has come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Senior. Obviously, you know that we are a constitutional democracy and we cannot advocate violence at all. So my guest will be the right one to respond to you. I just thought I should interject. Linda, your two last callers.
Thank you, Kennedy. So with regards to the first caller who claims that the democratic space in Zambia is not shrinking, and that what we need to be talking about is issues of the cost of living, mealy meal, the forex rates. And I agree entirely with him. But for citizens to be able to discuss those issues, they need to be able to do so without fear of arrest, without fear of harassment, without fear of going to jail. And quite frankly, if you recall, I think it was 2 years ago, there was a Daily Mail journalist who was arrested for taking photos of Zambians queuing up for mealie meal in Ndola. Is that freedom of expression? How are people supposed to comment on day-to-day issues like the cost of mealie meal if they're not allowed to comment freely or to report freely on these issues? So I'm not talking from without. And in all fairness, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, but I was there in the previous dispensation. And I can tell you I was also harassed. But that even gives me a very good vantage point to comment on where we are compared to there. Now, I think it's very fair to say that when this government was elected into office in 2021, there was an opening of the space compared to where we came from. People felt free, in fact, to express themselves. And we saw, thankfully, a reduction in cadarism, which by comparison to the previous government has reduced even now. Even though there's still some issues in bus stops and marketplaces sometimes, which is rising a little bit. Okay, and we hope it doesn't explode over the election period. But all credit to this government, definitely cadarism has reduced. But what you are comparing, Kola, is PF that took 10 years to get to the point at which we were so fed up with them that we decided to vote them out. Whereas this government is just beginning. They've just done 5 years, and the signs are not very promising in terms of where we're going, in terms of the rule of law and the democratic space. But I've mentioned the laws that are being weaponized against citizens. I've mentioned people who've been arrested for making mere comments on radio stations. That is not democracy. What's going to happen if this is where we are now? What's going to be the case in another 5 years' time? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves. But all fairness to you, this is a democracy, and I'm very happy to hear views that challenge mine, because that is how a democracy should work. Kennedy, if you could just remind me what the last caller said.
If senior citizen Fano Mwangala was alleging that this government has destroyed the democracy that we fought for, and he's saying, you being a lawyer, what must citizens do if all else fails?
Well, I think as a nation and a young democracy, we have a lot of things to be proud of in terms of our democratic credentials as voters and citizens. Since 1991, Zambians have felt empowered to decide who they want to lead them after observing what happens during a particular government's time in office. Now, we hope that, for example, the amendments that have been made to the Constitution do not make it more difficult for Zambians to exercise those rights going forward. But still, that power remains in the hands of ordinary citizens. So again, this is an election year. Exercise your right to vote. Choose who you want to lead you, and do it for the right reasons. And, you know, whoever you choose should be somebody who promotes, understands, and respects the Constitution and also the rule of law, because the two are intertwined. I just gave you that example of the journalist who was arrested for reporting on queues for mealie meal. Those are bread and butter issues, which any citizen should have the right to comment on. This is where day-to-day life meets politics. And every citizen should be aware and know what to do when the time is right.
Thank you so much, Linda. Bishop James Chipili from Mansa says, good evening, Mr. Moderator and Linda. UPND and HH are dictators. It continue to be in power. Democracy we fought for, it will be history. And the other SMS, sorry, the phone keeps ringing, even though I stopped picking calls. Please don't call. I'm just reading some SMSs now. This one says, Wapike and Linda, I don't think you are being fair to government. This government mean very well to the nation. People are free to express themselves. New political parties are being formed every day. We are seeing massive development in Zambia. The opposition should tame their tongues. We are okay in Zambia. Is CK. I just wrote initials, so we don't know what CK stands for. Good evening, Pastor and Madam Kasonde. Valungu ngabali kwata va president tukwete ava ngatavate kapo milambo from Undola. He's saying if President Lungu was like President Ichilema, then President Ichilema would not have become president. That's according to Milambo, sending in his SMS from Ndola. I wish we could continue, but time is up. My guest has been Linda Kasonde, Executive Director from the LCK Freedom Foundation, and I'm your host always on State of the Nation, Kenneth Mambwe. Until next time, may the Lord preserve our peace, and may the Lord watch over you and the nation at large. Shalom, shalom.